Hi everyone. For today's update, we've got memory, which is pretty much finished in terms of the coding and electronics now, thankfully. This one's been a real tough one for me, and I'll explain why very briefly. But we're pretty much there apart from the 5 green stage lights. I call them stage lights, the ones that tell you how many kind of stages you are through the game. It is stages in the manual, yeah. These ones here. Essentially, the reason is I've run out of pins on the ESP, so I'll have to set up a shift register or something like that. It'll be fairly simple, but I need to move everything to a different breadboard or rearrange things. So I didn't want to do that just now, but I did want to go through how the game works and how it looks, more importantly, as just a few days before recording this, I put a few videos up trying to go through some of the animations on how the buttons change their labels. I want a bit more feedback on that, so let me know what you think about how this looks. But just to walk you through the two main things here, we've got the top display by this little TFT SPI interface screen. Pretty simple to use, just drawing kind of lines and bitmaps, which I've made to display the numbers. That's been pretty simple and looks pretty effective, I think. And the bottom display here is the button display and a touch interface for that. So the original plan for the memory buttons was to have 4 physical buttons, and each one of those would have had a small e-ink display on them, which would have allowed that button to change what label it had. However, I couldn't find e-paper displays small enough, so I couldn't really get 4 buttons side by side on the modules, the size of the modules that I've got. So instead I kind of worked backwards. I looked at what size I had on the BOM and tried to figure out what kind of a display, what kind of an interface I could use on that. And we've got these small displays here. So essentially this is a 2.9 inch e-ink display, so much the same as the ones we've got for the serial display, which will be one of the widgets on the BOM. So getting that to display the right thing was pretty easy. Again, I had to create some more kind of bitmaps for the images of the buttons there, purely because they were too big for a font conversion, which added a bit of unnecessary complexity to it as well. But the e-ink display will show all 4 buttons and then use the touch interface. So it's less physical than it could otherwise have been if we were using real buttons. But again, you are kind of touching the right button. It's not like pressing the button next to the display. You are actually putting your finger right on what you want to press. So I think it's a fair compromise. And the real issue with the display there isn't getting it to show the right things, but getting the touch information out of it. So the display here is a waveshare display, and it's designed for a Raspberry Pi. So it's got these kind of 40 headers here, which would go straight on top of your Pi. And all of the examples and the kind of code and information they give you is all designed around the Pi. So I had to look at what they had presented in terms of that very specific example of how to use it. I had to reverse engineer it somewhat and learn about I2C comms, which I'd never used before, which is how the touch interface is. So once I slowly started unpicking all of that, I was able to kind of hack together reading data out of this to get the XY position of where touches are, and some kind of hack some interrupts to trigger the ESP to know when a button had been pressed. But enough of the chatting around this. I'll give you a quick demonstration of it working, and hopefully there are no issues. There could be a few issues in it. I haven't tested the displays doing the right thing, or the button prompts accepting the right ones. But I'll run you through, and again, let me know what the animation is like, because I really would have liked to have had the animation to have had the buttons fade out from left to right and then kind of come back from left to right, much like in the game. However, the display just does not refresh fast enough for that. Instead of getting a kind of 0.3 of a second partial update, I was getting 0.7, and that would have just taken far too long, and it would have gotten in the way of someone trying to defuse this bomb. And as nice as it would have looked, I didn't want it to frustrate users and for players to get really annoyed at having to wait for this animation to finish. So we'll start up again. And when I press this button, we'll get the start command sent through, and the displays will come on. So there we go, the displays kind of come on, slightly offset from each other, and we'll play the game. So stage 1, if the display is 2, press the button in the second position. So that is a 1. For stage 2, if the display is 1, press the button labelled 4. There we are. Then press the button in the third position. That's the 2. Then we've got another 3, so press the button in the same position you pressed in stage 2. So that was the third position, I'm sure. And lastly, we've got a 4, so press the button with the same label you pressed in stage 3. So my serial monitor is telling me the correct button is the button in the first position. I couldn't keep track of that while I was narrating and checking the video here, so hopefully that is correct. I'm going to do some testing after this to make sure it's all working correctly, but it is a bit of a nightmare trying to keep track of all of these variables, positions and labels in the code. But there we go, that's how it'll work. I just have to add on those stage lights and we're done. I've got one more thing to show before the video finishes, so let's move over to our 3D print segment. Okay, so I've been working on the 3D design for passwords. Again, I'm sure you've seen this on the Discord, but nearly there with it. I think close enough to show what I've been doing. So this is what I have currently. Again, the main feature of passwords is this large graphical LCD in the middle, and the 11 buttons, which are just small tactile switches, clicky switches there. You'll notice that we're missing the actual buttons, and that's because I'm waiting on a different color plastic to finish this one off, but almost there. And I can show you kind of how this comes together on the back. But if I pop it down, I've got a little display piece here to demonstrate. So the face will look something like this, with these buttons just set inside. The submit button is a pretty simple piece of plastic. The up and down arrows will be joined on a kind of thin strip that makes them slightly flexible. This allows the buttons to kind of stay in place, where they will be kind of trapped between the faceplate and the row of buttons underneath. So the buttons won't be able to really move apart from a little bit of flex that will allow them to press the switches. And underneath these, I've just printed a small strip of plastic with some gaps in, and that allows you to thread these small tactile switches through, solder some wires onto the back to connect them up, and again the button caps just sit on top and allow you to click them. So kind of simple in terms of the number of pieces needed, but really quite tricky in terms of getting the dimensions of everything just right. Not only making sure that the buttons would work, everything sat on top of each other, and I had some real difficulty getting the pieces the right sizes. So fastening the button plate onto the faceplate, if it was too tight, the buttons would press, they'd be pressed onto the switch and all the buttons would be pressed. And too loose, and the buttons would start rattling around, could come loose, and you couldn't press them far enough to click the switches in. But not only that, this graphical LCD is quite large, much larger than the size of the screen on the front, and so having to squeeze these switches as close to the edge of the circuit board as possible was a real challenge. So it does look a bit taller than it does in the game, but working with what practical pieces I can get hold of that do the similar job and kind of have the same look as the game. But there we go. Almost there with this one. Just waiting on that other plastic. Got to tidy up memory, and then moving on to another design. I think I might either do a design for memory itself or venting gas. I think it'd be quite interesting to look at the design of the needle modules. But that's all I've got for you now. Thank you very much. See you next time.